Hello, time for a Man in Gray book review. Today's book is Rock Crystal by Adalbert Stifter, translated from German by Elizabeth Meyer and Marion Moore. The translation originally published in 1945. This reprinted edition from 2008, published by New York Review of Books Press, part of their Classics series. It's 82 pages long. Adalbert Stifter was a 19th century Austrian writer who died in 1868 by suicide. And as we see all the time in these kind of romantic writer stories, he was completely obscure during his lifetime. None of his books sold well, wasn't very well known at all. After his death, people began to appreciate his writing, and today Stifter is considered one of the great 19th century prose stylists in German. This little novella tells a simple but very suspenseful story. It takes place in the Austrian Alps. There are two valleys adjacent to each other, and in each valley there's a little village. And the two villages don't really have much contact with each other, even though they're right next to each other. They have their own kind of culture that develops. But that changes to a degree when a shoemaker from one of the villages in one of the valleys, falls in love with a beautiful woman from a wealthy man in the next valley over, and he overcomes the father's opposition and marries her, takes her back to his village, and they have two small children, a boy and a girl. And during the summer months, these two small children will frequently hike down the valley, across a mountain pass into the adjacent valley to visit their grandparents, because their grandmother spoils them with treats and lavish meals and everything. And the story begins on Christmas Eve. So it's the middle of winter time, but the two little kids want to go visit their grandparents because they know they're going to get Christmas presents from them. Now, the weather's been stable, and it's cold, but it's not freezing cold, and the weather's been stable, and so they're able to talk both their parents into letting them hike across the mountain pass down to the valley. And the mother says, you can do this, but you need to not dawdle. As soon as you get lunch over with, you need to hurry back because it gets dark early in the winter. So the boy promises that he'll get himself and his sister back. So they hike down the valley, and there's no problem. It goes pretty simply, and they get there, and they're treated, to a Christmas Eve meal by the grandparents. They give them a bunch of snacks to take with them, and the grandmother gives the boy a flask of coffee extract, which is a liquid form of coffee, which you can concentrated coffee, which you can dilute and then brew up to make coffee with, because her daughter, the grandmother's daughter, is a coffee drinker. So they take this back with them. But almost as soon as they leave, it starts snowing, and the snow gets heavier and heavier, and it eventually turns into a surprise blizzard. And there's whiteout conditions, and the little boy gets lost, and the little girl kind of hero worships her brother, and so she does whatever he says, and he winds up getting confused, and he goes up the mountain instead of down, and winds up leading them onto a glacier. And it's this section of the book, that Stifter's poetic writing really comes to the fore. You hear some really beautiful descriptions of the ice and the shifting lights as the sun is starting to go down, the light's changing as it reflects through the ice, and so some really beautifully written passages. And the two kids don't panic. They know that eventually they'll find their way down if they just keep going. So they just keep going, but they don't realize they're going the wrong direction, and they're going farther and farther out onto the ice. Eventually, it starts to get dark, and the boy realizes they have to stop because they could fall into a crevasse or die from hypothermia or something. Fortunately, every once in a while in the glacier, there's a passage, a section of rock and bare ground, and in one of these they find a little cave, and so they crawl in there to get out of the snow and dry themselves off, and they eat whatever snacks they have available. And as they start to get sleepy, the boy remembers that their father told them, if you ever fall asleep in the outside, you might freeze to death. So he uncorks the coffee extract, and even though it's really concentrated, he manages to drink some of it. He forces his sister to drink some of it, and the caffeine kind of kicks in. They've never had coffee before, and they become kind of hyper, and that keeps them awake through the night. Also, during the night, there's a huge booming, crashing, series of crashing sounds as some of the ice in the glacier shifts positions and breaks apart. So you hear that, and there's very, very poetic descriptions of that as well. Now, while all that's going on, all these kids are lost on the glacier, of course, the parents realize that they're not coming home. So they raise the alarm. And they send a messenger down to the valley, to the other valley, to warn, to tell the grandparents what's happening. So everybody in both villages, all the men in both villages, start out in a search for the kids. And of course, being Austrians, they're very organized about it. They kind of divide things up into certain sections, and they all go searching through the night for the kids. Now, I don't want to spoil the ending and give away the suspenseful ending, but one of the points, one of the themes of this book is the strong community spirit that these little mountain villages have. Most of the people in both these villages don't know these kids at all, but they stop their Christmas celebrations and put on their warm clothes and meet and go out in the night, climbing up a mountainside in the dark, hunting for these kids. And they, there's a real community spirit, and it brings both villages together. The two villages that really didn't have much in common, they find common ground in searching for these kids on Christmas Eve. That's a really beautifully written story, very suspenseful, and very poetically written. One of the translators into English, Marion Moore, was a major American poet, so it's not surprising that she would do a really good job translating this. And the other translator, Elizabeth Meyer, was one of the major German English translators of the mid-20th century. So both translators, top of their game here. It's one of the great German English translations. So if you are interested in German literature, or you want to read a book that's exciting to read and a very quick read, it's only about 80 pages, so you can read it in an afternoon. This is a really good book. I would recommend, however, that you not read the introduction and go straight to the book. Go back to the introduction if you want to after it's over. There's a short introduction by the English poet W.H. Auden. And it's a good introduction, but Auden gives away the plot, so he spoils the book. And part of the excitement of this book is the thrill of, are they going to die out there? Are they going to find them in time? Are they going to find their way down on their own? Are the searchers going to find them? What's going to happen? And he gives away the whole thing in the introduction. So skip the introduction, read the book, and then go back to Auden's introduction if you want to afterwards. Anyway, it's a book that I recommend if you are interested, again, in German literature, or you want to read something that's a literary quality that doesn't take very long to read. The book is Rock Crystal. The author is Adalbert Stifter. This has been another Man and Gray book review. Thanks for watching.